me see, I want to look at my notes now, see where I was. Yeah, so Amy spent her first night in intensive care while she was waiting for the neurosurgeons to be available in a Temple Street hospital in Dublin, where they performed the surgery. The surgery being that they had to fix her back up as much as possible, so they put the membrane back inside of her wound, and they seal her back up and try to clean it up as much as possible and close it over. So that was the first operation. She was in intensive care in Hollis Street, or in Temple Street then after that, recovering from that operation. And then a couple of days later she underwent another operation because she had another further condition called hydrocephalus, which kind of goes hand in hand with spina bifida. Hydrocephalus means water on the brain in Greek or something like that, or Latin. But basically the spinal fluid builds up in the brain, and it can't drain naturally down into the it can't cycle through the body naturally. However, it usually happens. I don't know how it does it, but Amy had to have a special device implanted under her skin in her head, which taps into her skull and alleviates the pressure, and the fluid comes down from a tube out of her skull into this little device, which has a pressure release valve on it that drains the excess fluid down in a valve, in a pipe actually, a tube under her skin that goes down into her belly somewhere, for lack of a better word, or her lymph nodes, or whatever the terminology is, and it just drains naturally and it keeps cycling. Like years ago, the child would have had a very, very large head, a swollen head, which could eventually cause death and other complications, brain damage and all that, but thankfully now they have these devices which alleviate all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so she went for the operation for that anyway, and she was basically in hospital for a month altogether at the start. In the it's not intensive care, but it's the next level down from intensive care. I don't know, it was one nurse to one child basically, that level of care in it, like, you know, and it was really good. It was the best thing for her, like, you know, to get her on the road to recovery. But after the month we got to bring her home, and we came back to a fanfare of all the family was here holding up placards and all, and we got home very, very emotional for us, and I was very happy to have her back. I remember thinking about, like, before she came back, like, I remember thinking that how much I hated getting up at night time with the children, my other two daughters, when they were young, and I had to get up for the night feeds and all that kind of stuff. But for that first month, I was just, every night I was like, oh please, can we get to bring her home tonight? And, you know, I'd love to do that now again, like, you know what I mean, that's the way I was feeling at the time. But we got her home, and we started on her, adjusting her to our family life and all that kind of stuff. My wife obviously was on maternity leave from work, but we would have to put full-time care against Amy, like, because she needs that level of care and attention, like, you know. So we decided that my wife Mag would give up her full-time job, which she had for 10 years or whatever, and she would become Amy's full-time carer, and I would continue working as a web developer or whatever. So Mag left her job, and we decided to, so we started on the road to rearing Amy, as we say over in Ireland. With the lack of the extra income coming in, Mag got a carer's benefit, it was called. I think it was you get a certain payment every week from the government in Ireland. It's I don't know what the equivalent of it in the US is, but we call it. There's a version of it called the dole over here in Ireland, or social welfare. But it's called carer's benefit in Mag's case because she's Amy's full-time carer. So you also get, the government provides you with an extra payment called a domiciliary care allowance, and that comes in every month, and it's to contribute towards any hospital visits or needs that you might have with a child that's disabled or has special needs that has extra cost involved and all that kind of stuff. So that can come in quite handy for that kind of stuff. So Amy came home, her sisters loved her immediately, everyone was doting around her, you know, usual stuff with a baby that you would expect to have. As the months went by and people started getting used to her, and she started acclimatising to the home, we started getting more comfortable, so we started going out every now and again on occasion, going down to the pub or going to functions or events or whatever. So on one occasion we went to a wedding, and my wife's mother was babysitting for us, and we got a call in the middle of the night saying that Amy wasn't well at all, like, you know, she's very sick. And so we decided to leave that function that we were at the wedding and come home to collect her and all that. And when we got there, we just couldn't believe our eyes. Like, she was totally changed. She was, it was unbelievable looking. Her eyes were bulging out of her head. Looked like she was in complete agony. She did not look like our child whatsoever. So we had this little a card in her purse, in Mag's purse, called a shunt card, which explains some stuff that you should look out for in case there's any problems with the shunt that's in her head. That's what the device is called in her head, for hydrocephalus. And sensitivity to light was the main one, and feeling really groggy and sick and moaning, which she was. So we brought her into our local doctor, and they just said straight up to Temple Street. So we drove as quickly as we could up to Temple Street, and luckily enough I hadn't been drinking at the wedding, but we got up as quickly as we could, and we were brought straight into the emergency room, and they done all sorts of tests and all sorts of examinations and all this kind of stuff. And to cut a story short, she basically, the shunt in her head was malfunctioning, and it had to be replaced. So she had to go undergo another operation to get that fixed. But this happened on two separate occasions at least, where she had to get a shunt revision, which these things are relatively new technology, and they're known to have, complications and all that kind of stuff, but not to get the right version of for the child. I remember, so we had a couple of revisions of the shunt, and that was fine. Everything was back. A week or two later, she was back home, and we go through the cycle again, and everything was fine. But I remember on one occasion she got sick again, and the same symptoms. The eyes were bulging, and we just knew that something was up, so we didn't go to our doctor. We just went straight up to Temple Street. Again, we got straight into the emergency room and did on the usual round of tests and questions and all this kind of stuff, and we just thought like it'd be just a general, like a repeat process of replacing the shunt and all that. But this time they didn't think it was the shunt, and they thought it was this and they thought it was that, and they didn't know what was going on. And inevitably she was up there for a month at this case, because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. It was one of the toughest times of my life now, and my wife's life. My wife basically lived up in the hospital with her for a month, and I stayed at home balancing my job and minding our other two children, and it was an absolute nightmare. But to cut another long story short, I got really upset and annoyed over it, and